So today, guys, we're going to be reacting to Zack D films videos. This is going to be fun. Okay, here is the first one.
If you drop a rat into a jar of food, it would eat freely, sleep when it's full, and do the same thing day after day. Now, at first, the jar would be so full it could reach the top easily and leave whenever it wanted. But the more it eats, the emptier the jar gets, slowly pulling the rat away from the exit without it even noticing. And even though it's comfortable, it's slowly trapping itself inside. And this is the same for human comforts. The more you sink into your comfort zone, the harder it is to escape, until you're in so deep that doing anything else feels almost impossible.
Oh my gosh,
if you drop a rat into a jar of food, it would eat. During the race, his hamstring suddenly tore inside his leg, and he collapsed onto the track, while the other runners raced towards the finish. Years of training and planning were gone in an instant. Then he grabbed his hamstring in pain. Medics rushed toward him, but he waved them away. Then, somehow, he forced himself back to his feet and started hopping toward the finish line. Every step looked painful, and he got to a point where he could hardly take another step. Then the crowd watched as a different man broke through security and ran onto the track. It was his father. He wrapped an arm around his son and helped him keep going step by step. They were the last to cross the finish line, but 65,000 people stood and cheered anyway. During the race, they pulled the dipstick from the truck and quietly marked the full line lower than it should be. So when the engine was checked, it looked like it had enough oil. But the engine would always have less than it was supposed to. You see, Nazis were forcing the workers to build army trucks for them. But legend says the workers secretly messed with the dipsticks. And without enough oil, the engine was slowly ground down, eventually locking up and leaving them stranded. They pulled the dipstick from the truck. If your friend is bench pressing and gets the bar almost back to the rack, but can't push it any higher, it means his arms are pushing almost as hard as the bar is pushing down. So the bar is basically stuck in place. That means the spotter doesn't have to lift the whole weight. They only have to add the tiny bit of force your friend is missing. So even if the bar is really heavy, the spotter should be able to lift it with just one finger. But don't actually try this because it'll probably slip off and crush your friend. If your friend is bench,
I just submitted a vlog into the
we don't want to try that,
through the ceiling with a bat in his hand, dropped down into a locked room, and grabbed a different bat, leaving the other in its place. You see, earlier that day, his teammate had brought in a bat filled with cork, which made the bat lighter and quicker when he swung. But the other team grew suspicious and had it taken away to be tested, so his team sent him to steal it back and swap it with a clean bat. That way, officials would find nothing. But the bat he left behind had another player's name on it, so the officials caught the swap, found the cork, and suspended the cheating teammate. He crawled, he loops a rope around the trunk and slides his left foot inside. As he stands on it, the rope grips tight enough to hold his weight. Then a second rope is wrapped higher up and looped around his right thigh. He leans back, and this one bites into the trunk too. By shifting his weight between the two, he inches up the trunk until he reaches the coconuts at the top. He loops a rope around the trunk and slides. You walk up to order a coffee and point at the medium for $4.50. But right before you pay, the cashier points to the large and says it's only 50 cents more. So now the medium suddenly feels stupid. You didn't even want a large, but your brain starts doing the math. Because for just 50 cents more, the large feels way too good to pass up. And that's exactly why companies do this. You see, when there are only two options, most people compare them directly. But when they add a middle option that's priced almost the same as the biggest one, well, it makes the expensive option feel like the obvious choice. So instead of buying what you actually wanted, you spend more money, get more coffee, and walk away thinking you made the smart decision. The food was running low. He couldn't afford to feed his own dog. So he walked him to a convenience store and sold him to a man for just $40. He hesitated before handing over the leash. You see, he was really broke, and he was trying to sell a movie script that he believed in, but no one wanted it. But then the script finally sold, and Rocky was going into production. So he tracked down the new owners of the dog and begged to buy him back. But they demanded thousands of dollars to return him, and the dog he'd sold for $40 became part of the film that made him famous. The food was running low.
AI is ruining.
He was given a sheet with 3 words listed, and he was told to rearrange the letters to make new ones. But no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't. When he looked up, he realized half the class was already done. And since he still couldn't solve the words, he felt stupid and embarrassed. But his side of the class actually got 2 words that were impossible to solve, while the other side of the class got 2 easy words, which is why they were able to finish. But the 3rd word was Cinerama, which everyone in the class had. The kids with the easy words felt confident, so they quickly rearranged it to American. But the kids with the impossible words already believed they would fail, which ended up meaning they did. He was given a sheet with, if you toss a baseball up in a car going 100 miles an hour, why doesn't it fly back into your chest at 100 miles an hour? And if you activate a drone inside the car, it appears stationary to you, but is it actually moving 100 miles an hour? And if so, why doesn't it need to thrust forward with its propellers? Well, it's because the ball, the drone, and even the air inside are already moving with the car. So when it goes up, it keeps that motion with no headwind to push it back. This also means if you removed the windshield, well, it would be a whole different story. If you toss a
The $10.
He took a bite of a boneless wing, and something felt wrong in his throat. For 3 days after, he had a fever and couldn't keep food down. Later, doctors found a thin chicken bone stuck inside. So he sued the restaurant. He argued that the menu said boneless, so there shouldn't have been any bones. But the court said boneless wings was a style of food, not a promise that every bone had been removed. And because bones are naturally part of chicken, the restaurant wasn't responsible. Meaning, according to the court, even boneless wings can still have bones. He took a bite of a boneless wing, and something. As you run into the course, you have to try to dodge the dangling wires all around you. But each wire is live with a. He raced to be the first man over the wall, but as soon as he reached the top, he was shot and killed by an arrow. And the next man did the same, but he was thrown to the ground below. This happened over and over again, until one man finally survived and made it inside the enemy walls, which disappointed the rest of the soldiers. You see, the first one over the wall would receive a crown, which acted like a medal of honor. This gave him fame and fortune, letting him climb the ranks into greater political power, which is why so many soldiers were willing to risk their lives for it. He raced to be the first man over the wall, but as soon as he reached the top, he was shot and killed by an arrow. And the next man did the same, but he was thrown to the ground below. This happened over and over again, until one man finally survived and made it inside the enemy walls, which disappointed the rest of the soldiers. You see, the first one over the wall would receive a crown,
I don't know why I did that 2 times, I'm sorry.
When you put them on, tiny microphones inside pick up the noise around you, and they read the highs and lows of the sound wave. It uses it to create a wave that's practically the opposite. And when this is played through the headphones, the 2 sound waves cancel each other out, which cuts out a lot of the outside noise. But if your mom suddenly screams at you, the headphones have to hear the sound, read the wave, and make the opposite one. So if the noise changes too fast, by the time they react, it's already too late. When you put them on, tiny microphones inside pick up the noise around you, and they read the highs and lows. He punched the doll and started yelling at it while a preschooler watched him. Later on, she was given a doll, while scientists observed her every movement. But even though nobody told her what to do with it, she started acting aggressively and even made up new ways to hurt the doll. You see, kids learn by copying the people around them. So if they're watching something violent, they might imitate what they see, which could make them start acting aggressive. He punched the doll and if you were accidentally swallowed, grab onto the back of the tongue and kick around to trigger a gag reflex. This should get you coughed out. But if you miss your chance, spread your arms and legs wide in the throat, bracing yourself against the walls to stop from sliding down. This would hold you in place for a while until the person swallows food, which would push you straight into the stomach. Now, you could climb a chunk of food floating in the acid, but at this point, you're just waiting for the inevitable. If you were accidentally swallowed, grab onto the back of the tongue and kick around to trigger a gag reflex. This should get you coughed out. But if you miss your chance, spread your arms and legs wide in the throat, bracing yourself against the walls to stop from sliding down. This would hold you in place for a while until the person swallows food, which would push you straight into the stomach. Now, you could climb a chunk of food floating in the acid, but at this point, you're just waiting for the inevitable. If you were accidentally, her arm slipped into the gap between it and the wall, wedged in so tight she couldn't pull it back. And as the door kept trying to open, it dragged her deeper in. They grabbed the door and tried pulling it back to free her arm, but nothing worked. Even when they greased her arm with hand sanitizer, she didn't budge. And for 3 long minutes, they kept pulling until they rubbed lotion around her arm. Then she pulled as hard as she could, and it finally popped free. Her arm slipped. If you stacked up Legos a mile into the sky, somehow the bottom Lego brick still won't crush. But if you try the same thing with concrete, it contains tiny cracks and weak spots, meaning the bottom blocks would eventually crack after about 2,000 feet. But Legos are made from tough plastic, and their interlocking shape keeps the pressure centered. So when the stack is perfectly lined up, the force travels straight down, which means, in theory, one Lego brick could support a tower 4 times taller than the Burj Khalifa. If you stacked up... When the hurricane hit their orphanage, they had no money to fix it. More than 40 kids were about to lose their home, but their town was hosting a fishing tournament, offering a huge cash prize to any team that caught a blue marlin. Now, none of the boys had ever fished before, and their guardian had no experience with this type of fish, but they signed up anyway. Then, right before the tournament, the man crashed his car, nearly forcing them to drop out. But he managed to make it onto the boat, and soon they had a bite. For almost 45 minutes of struggling, they dragged a giant blue marlin onto the boat. It was the biggest catch of the day, and the orphans won more than $250,000, enough to save their home. When the hurricane hit their orphanage, the hawk sees a mouse and swoops down with its claws open. But when its feet hit the cage, they slip into tiny loops of fishing line. Then, as the hawk tries to fly away, the loops tighten around its feet. Because the cage is pinned down by a heavy weight, the hawk can't lift it off the ground, so it stays trapped on top of the cage until a trained handler carefully loosens the loops, checks the bird for injuries, fits it with a tag, and lets it go. The hawk sees a mouse.
Creates stunning.
The customer suddenly attacked her, and the shock left her unable to speak. Since the injury happened on the job, she said she could never work again. So her workplace's insurance company paid her every month for 16 years. But there was a problem. During that time, she saw other doctors, and none of them recorded that she was unable to speak. The insurance company got suspicious and hired a detective to watch her. He saw her chatting outside a school and making phone calls. Then he walked up to her with a hidden camera and asked for directions, and she answered him out loud. A court ruled that her muteness was no longer real and her payments were cut off. The customer suddenly attacked her, and the shock left her unable to speak. Since the injury happened on the job, she said she could never work again. So her workplace's insurance company paid her every month for 16 years. But there was a problem. During that time, she saw other doctors, and none of them recorded that she was unable to speak. The insurance company got suspicious and hired a detective to watch. If your family had you cremated, as the intense heat filled the chamber, it would dry out your muscles and reshape the proteins inside. This would shrink your muscles down, forcing your arms and legs to bend while your fists clenched in front of your chest. And you would eventually end up in a boxing pose, making it look like your body was still moving before it finally burned away. If your family had you... The prisoners have been sitting in front of a blank wall their entire lives. They don't turn around, they just stare at the blank wall. Now, place a fire behind them. Then build a walkway between the fire and the prisoners, and raise a short wall. Now, move objects across the walkway. The fire will cast their shadows onto the wall. But because the prisoners have never seen anything else, they believe the shadows are real. They name the shapes and base their reality from them. But what if one prisoner were freed and finally turned around? He would see the objects being moved and the fire casting the shadows. He would slowly understand the shadows weren't reality. But if you return him to the others and he tries to explain it to them, they'll think he's crazy and keep looking at the wall because the shadows are the only reality they've ever known. The prisoners have been sitting in front of a blank wall their entire lives. They don't turn around, they just stare at the blank. He looked up and saw a plane drop something from the sky. A small object falling straight toward the city. Then, a blinding flash. The explosion ripped through everything around him. Buildings collapsed. Fires spread instantly. He was thrown to the ground. Burns covered his arms and face, and his hearing was permanently damaged. He spent the night in a shelter, and then made his way back home to a different city. A few days later, he went into work, still bandaged, and started telling his boss what he had seen. Then, a plane flew overhead. Another object fell. Another flash. Another explosion. His bandages were blown off.
No.
He was exposed all over again, but somehow lived to tell the story. He looked up and saw a plane drop something from the sky. A small object falling straight toward the city.
Honey, I brought back
If you put on a backpack with...
Honey, I brought back enough tomatoes to last us a whole month.
Good boy. Now sign this divorce paper. My daughter is remarrying someone who doesn't smell like dirt.
I spent all my savings.
Yeah.
If you put on a backpack with nothing inside, your shoulders will still tense, your back will brace, and your muscles will get ready to lift. But then, there's nothing inside. So your body is ready for a load that never shows up, which can make the empty backpack feel lighter than not wearing it. You see, when you expect something to be hard, you should prepare for it. And if it turns out to be easier than expected, well, you don't just feel relieved, you feel stronger. If we turned the entire ocean into Jell-O, what would happen if an asteroid hit it? Well, a normal ocean could produce a deadly tsunami, but since Jell-O is mostly water, the energy would tear through it, breaking it up into chunky waves. These waves would pile onto the coast, covering streets and buildings. You see, the real danger isn't the impact, it's getting caught in it. Because once you're trapped, you would just slowly suffocate inside the Jell-O. If we turn the entire ocean into...
Metal has this feature called...
They pulled the Cheeto out of the bag and realized it was shaped almost exactly like a Charizard. Eventually, it went viral online, so it was carefully placed on a custom Pokemon card, stored inside a display case, and then put up for bidding at $250. As more and more bids appeared, the price climbed higher. Finally, it was bought for almost $90,000, over 20,000 times its original price, which earned it a Guinness World Record. They pulled the Cheeto out of the bag. If you ripped off the screen at a movie theater, stretched it over a giant sink, and poured a pot of pasta over it, the water would fall through the screen and into the sink below, acting like a strainer. You see, most movie theaters put their speakers at the front of each room, hiding it behind the screen. But normal screens would block the sound, so these are covered with thousands of tiny holes, which let the sound flow out through the screen as if it's coming from the characters themselves. If you They cut his thigh bone into 2 pieces, screwed in a special metal rod along his bone, secured it with pins, and sewed the wound back up. You see, he was born with one leg shorter than the other. But after the surgery, the boy used a special remote to rotate the gears inside. It would extend the rod just a little bit every day. This slowly stretched the 2 ends of his bones apart, and as the gaps slowly opened, his body filled it in with more bone. And after several months, his leg was longer than before. They cut his Slide your bread into the decorative metal cage, then swing it shut against the glowing center coil. As the wire heats up, it toasts the inner face. And once that side turns golden, just press the button on the side, which releases a spring-loaded hinge, and the cage swings outward, away from the heat, spinning the bread all the way around and letting the pale, untoasted side face the coil. But since the heated coil was completely exposed, well, just one slip could sear your fingers. Slide your bread into the
Looking for a new...
When the ant falls into the sand pit, a hidden ant lion is usually waiting underneath the loose sand. And as the ant tries to climb out, the walls collapse beneath its feet, sliding it closer and closer to the predator. But then the ant lowers its giant jaws against the ground. The jaws tense up like loaded springs before snapping shut at an incredible speed. The impact is so powerful that it launches the ant straight into the air. And if the jump sends it high enough, the ant can blast completely out of the pit. When the ant falls into lightly lick your left ring finger and slide it against the soft webbing between your right index and middle finger, lining them up at the same height. Next, straighten out your ring finger and tug.
Anyways, guys, this guy's called Zack D Films. Anyways, he's the GOAT, so definitely.
The rest of your left hand underneath your right. Then bring your hands up to your mouth and close your lips into an O, lining up the center with the nail of your left ring finger. After that, press your ring finger into the webbing to slowly create tension. And when you flick your finger outwards, it pops free from the webbing, sending the sound into your mouth and letting you do a pop whistle.
I'm gonna do 2 more.
He threw the rock at the seal, just barely missing its head. And locals yelled at him, telling him it was endangered and that he'd have to pay a huge fine. But the tourist just shrugged, saying he was rich, so he didn't care. But when a local man heard about it, he found the tourist and beat the heck out of him. Now, nobody reported it, but someone did film the attack. And instead of punishing the man, the local senator wrote an official letter of recognition, thanking the attacker for teaching the tourist a lesson. If you dumped resin over a Big Mac and hardened it into a block, the resin would stop any germs from coming in, so mold wouldn't grow as easily. And after 250 years, if you sawed it open, you might think you could eat a perfectly preserved burger. But after several decades, the trapped moisture inside would slowly make the burger fall apart, while the fats would start to stink. And if there was bacteria on the food, it could leave behind dangerous toxins over time, meaning you would probably just throw up. If you dumped resin over a Big Mac and hardened it,
you can now generate imaging.
If you shine a green, red, and blue light, each color will stimulate a different set of cones in the back of your eye. And when all 3 are triggered at once, your brain will be tricked into seeing white light where the beams overlap. Now, if you place a board with a slit in front of the wall, it will split the white light back into 3 colored stripes, since each light comes from a slightly different position. But if something blocks part of the light, it creates 3 colored shadows, because from each angle, 1 color gets blocked, while the other 2 keep mixing. Block blue and red plus green makes yellow. Block green and red plus blue makes magenta. block red, and green plus blue makes cyan. If you shine a green, roll a piece of paper into a foot-long tube and hold it to your right eye while touching the side. If you ate a firefly, would it light if the fabric If you ate a firefly, would it light up in your stomach? And how many would you have to eat in order for you to glow? Well, inside a firefly's body, special chemicals mix with oxygen to create that familiar glow. And to match your body weight, you would need to eat around 53,000 of them. But since your stomach is full of acid, there's no oxygen to react with, and the chemicals would just be digested. Even if they stayed intact, your body isn't built to activate them. And since they're toxic, you would actually just end up poisoning yourself. If the fabric gets pinched between its jaws, it can also block the teeth from meshing. So you might just yank on it, but this can make the snag worse and bend the teeth. Instead, pull the fabric out slowly with your fingers, then gently slide the zipper. If it still sticks, rub a pencil over the teeth, then straighten out any bent prongs, and the zipper will glide again. If the fabric gets pinched between its jaws, it can also block the teeth from meshing. So you might just yank on it,